Hello, everyone, and welcome to this week's edition of Ignite. Today, I'm really excited to be joined by Joe and Pete Donald, founders of Triptix. Welcome, guys.
Thank you.
Thank you so much for being here. Today, I'd love to learn a little bit more about your company. Can you just give me a brief intro to start off?
Certainly. So it's a flight and ticket aggregator for UK and Irish football fans who would like to attend matches abroad.
Very cool. Okay, so I want to learn a lot more about it, but I want to start back at the beginning. So tell me, where are you guys from, and where did you go to school, and what were you like in school?
Good start.
Certainly. So we're both born in Dublin, but moved to Edinburgh when we were young. In school, always had a big sort of interest in like sports and PE. I was much more interested in things like English and history and modern studies, and sort of that led me on a path in university towards studying philosophy and politics. And Pete's background is quite different to mine.
Yeah. Big in sports. Did a lot of sort of athletics, cross-country running, played a lot of football in school. I sort of more engineering and maths is what I was into. So I went on to study at the University of Strathclyde after high school. So studied civil and environmental engineering there.
When you were in school, when you were younger, did you think about being entrepreneurs? Was that on your radar at all?
Not particularly. Maybe in the last couple of years of school, I'd started reading some books around startups, but it was never clear to me what that would look like, and definitely the business that we set up wasn't a product of sort of sitting down and saying, I'm going to start a business, now let's figure out what that will be. It was the idea that sort of came to us that led us to start a business and go down this path.
Yeah. One thing I would say to that as well, though, is we have sort of our aunt runs a restaurant in Dublin, and so we do have sort of a few people in our family that have set up businesses, done stuff like that. So I'd imagine that is part of it as well, as sort of having a couple of people who you are close to that have done different things and sort of work for themselves.
So those role models were influencing you from an early age, even if you didn't consciously realize that they were, probably. Yeah. So Joe, you talked about the idea. Let's talk about where the idea came from. Was it a spark, or is it something that built over time? How did it start?
I'd say it was something that built over time, but yeah, it definitely crystallized over a couple of trips that Pete and I went on. The first trip we went on to try and attend a game abroad, we booked our flights and accommodation and we got there, but we just hadn't planned it very well, and so pitched up at Lotto Park in Brussels and couldn't get our hands on tickets. The following year went to a different city, went to Eindhoven the next year. We wound up getting tickets to the game, but we didn't know much about the city going into it. And sort of the year after that, we went to Milan, went to the Milan Derby, which is to this day one of the best sort of matches I've ever seen. And we managed to get all the aspects of the trip right. And at that point, we sort of came to the conclusion there are probably other people who would want a service that aggregates all this information, makes it really easy for traveling fans to get to games around Europe. So over the course of a couple trips, it kind of became clear to us that there was definitely an offering there that would bring value to football fans, and obviously football fans make up 50% of the population in the UK and Ireland, so there's a big audience for it.
A sort of core of the problem that we're dealing with is the fact that kind of, if you think about the music ticketing industry, most of it's hosted on places like Ticketmaster. They're kind of these big aggregators, whereas with something like football, you have all these individual clubs around Europe. All their websites are in different languages, and they all have their own distinct ticketing system, because they want to take in the revenue from that. But as a result, there's no single place where anybody has pieced these things together. And so that's kind of what we're doing. We're trying to connect all these dots of all these clubs, put all the tickets in one place. You obviously do get ticket aggregators, but they're always reselling tickets. So they'll be making a markup in the background, whereas we're always trying to access from source and then pair that with a usable flight. So that's sort of the core objective of it.
We sort of started producing like a free newsletter, and we just send out something very basic, 5 offers each week, very much just a minimum viable product. Is there any interest in this? We started to get some interest, but then pandemic hit. We had maybe 1,000 people signed up, and we had to sort of pack the whole thing in. And then after the pandemic, we just decided to actually make a more complete offering. Instead of 5 offers each week, tracking down hundreds of different games with lots of different travel options. And at that point, we saw sort of a fairly sizable amount of growth just in 5 months between sort of setting up and the end of the season that year. And within about 6 months or so, we had about 25,000 people using the service, and suddenly it became clear to us that actually, yeah, we can really kick on with this. And yeah, over the last couple of years, that's grown to 80,000 users. And yeah, we've been fortunate enough to get some funding from Scottish Edge along the way.
And so when you first started, it was, I don't want to say just a newsletter, but it was a newsletter, right? You hadn't built anything complicated, anything beyond that. So you really were able to kind of test the waters, see if there's demand, understand what customers wanted before you actually invested much of anything, really, right?
Yeah, and that's a very good point. We yeah, it was incredibly low cost initially. We did it for basically no initial investment. There's newsletter services that you can access for almost no cost. And so yeah, we were really able to sort of test the system without having to put much risk in, which was very good. Yeah, and then as we grew, we basically were essentially only spending the money that we were bringing in, so that we got that initial growth without a lot of risk to start with.
I think we hear that a lot. People saying like, well, I couldn't possibly start a business because I don't have any money to start. Actually, those initial ideas to see if there's something there, which can then allow you to convince others to support you on that mission. There are some really nice, cheap, low cost ways of doing that. And how old were you guys when you started?
It's a good question. How 24, maybe 25?
Yeah, would have been about 2021 when I was sort of heading into
conceiving the idea.
Pandemic, and then yeah, all got shuttered for about a year and a half, and emerged on the other side.
And did you think at that point like, oh, this is going to be a business, or was it kind of like, oh, this is going to be a fun thing that we're going to do on the side?
I think initially we were just kind of testing out, and then when we came back to it after the pandemic had sort of started to die down and travel restrictions were easing off, we were also partially looking for something to do like together as almost like an activity. But yeah, as the numbers grew quite quickly, it sort of moves you towards spending a lot more time on it, and you realize, okay, there is something here.
Can you give me a little bit more about how it all works?
Yeah, I think a good place to start would be, so we had the initial newsletter, and then as Joe was saying, we grew the offering quite substantially, and we were looking to sort of give as many offers as we could. Off the back of that, we realized quite quickly that a newsletter is not the best place to store huge amounts of data. So we found a tool called Google AppSheet, which was a really low cost solution, which allows you to basically host a database that people can access. And that was a really good low cost solution for about a year for us. It cost about $50 a month. It was excellent. But then at that point, sort of as the user base continued to grow, we realized we'd need people to have sort of unique user logins and these sorts of things. So you've got your premium and your free subscriptions, and we need to be able to identify these customers. So that's when we built out the web app, which is what users are currently on. They'll sort of open up the home screen. We'll have some featured games, which are the games that we have identified as being sort of the best offer for the sort of highest quality trip, whether that be sort of the top teams or the most interesting matches. And then there's usually a database of somewhere between 125 to 150 games, all with, if you were to click on a fixture, it would have the airports that have departing flights for those fixtures. And then they'll click through and they can book their tickets.
Are there teams or locations that are most popular?
Milan's a good one because you've got teams there. It's a fantastic city. There's always cheap flights from the UK, always good flights from Edinburgh and London in particular.
Madrid and Barcelona are pretty big. Yeah, there's lots of teams around Paris as well, but Paris is a little bit more expensive to fly to usually. So yeah, but I'd say Milan's a great city for football. Rome's quite a good city for football as well. So the Scandinavian leagues run over the summertime, so that's quite helpful for us because it make sure we have an offering over the summertime when other leagues are down.
So I want to go back a little bit. You mentioned that you were building it, growing it, and then you said that you won some investment from Scottish Edge. Could you just tell us a little bit about what Scottish Edge is and kind of what you were able to get from that?
Absolutely. It's a competition where you pitch to a panel of judges, and you can get some grant and loan funding, and they have a few different competition categories. The first one we applied for and we were successful with in May of 2023 is Young Edge, and so that's a prize of up to 15,000, and that's just grant money. You don't have to pay that back, which is huge. that was a bit of a game changer for us because it was the first time we had more than we were always just sort of like cycling through money, and so suddenly having like £15,000 in the accounts, it gave us the opportunity to take a step back with it and think, oh, okay, well, what would this look like if if we had full control over the product and money was no object, what would this look like? And that's when we started to build out the web app and move away from Google App Sheet, which was, like Pete says, it was a great sort of low cost solution, but was fairly limited. So we used that money straight away, and over the course of maybe 9 months or so, built out a web app. And then just in December there, we were successful with full Scottish Edge. So we went back and sort of showed them the progress we'd made with the web app, and sort of made the case that building out a mobile app is the next logical step here. And so we made that pitch back in November, learned we were successful within 24 hours, and then had the sort of award ceremony start of December, and we won 75,000. 70% of that is loan, and 30% of it is grant. So yeah, just gave us again money in the bank to start thinking about the big picture, and we've just been thinking through how we now build out this mobile app, and that's something that will probably be ready to launch this summer.
Congratulations on winning not once but twice. That's absolutely brilliant. So I want to talk a little bit about your lives as entrepreneurs. So what have you loved about being an entrepreneur?
Question.
I think
Have you loved it? I guess is maybe the first question.
Yeah, definitely. One of the big things is looking at, seeing the numbers climb, seeing your sort of idea validated is one of the nicest pieces. But also sort of the freedom it gives you to work on sort of your own timeline, I think is nice, and knowing that if you are successful with it, then you'll sort of reap the rewards of what you're doing. It's a nice position to be in, and it's that in and of itself is very motivating.
Yeah. I think it's also I found it quite interesting because neither of us have really come from like a like a travel background or like a marketing background or these sorts of things. So you're stepping into lots of different worlds and kind of seeing how different things work, and you're learning about lots of different areas you might not have necessarily studied or needed to know about previously. But yeah, sort of having your foot in lots of different camps and sort of seeing what's going on, I think has been quite interesting. I think the key piece of knowing that your output's going to dictate the reward at the end, but it's a little bit daunting, but at the same time, that's kind of, I feel like it's more rewarding as a result. Also, yeah, getting to work with Joe is fun. Getting to work with someone you're close to is quite enjoyable as well. So that's always a nice piece.
You have to say that, right?
Well, he didn't say it.
Now. And I guess I want to touch on the other part about it as well, because I think all of those things you said around the good parts of it, those are really common themes that we hear. But also, I think it would be irresponsible for us to not mention that it is quite tough to be an entrepreneur, and it can be quite challenging. And, I know you mentioned that when you first started off, then you got hit by the pandemic and the whole thing had to stop. So I'm curious about some of the challenges that you faced, but also how you've overcome them. Like, what motivated you to restart after the pandemic? How did you get that energy back up to do that, et cetera? How do you keep yourself going?
I think one of the sort of daunting things is the fact there really aren't any like right decisions. There's certainly been times when we've been approached a couple of times about acquisitions or investment, and those are such big decisions that don't have clear answers, and so that can be quite daunting. Is trying to figure out whether the decision you're making in a current moment will be sort of regrettable down the line, but it hasn't been, and I feel like we've made the right decisions up until now. In terms of motivation after the pandemic, I think we'd seen enough interest in the sort of preceding 12 months to think it's worth giving it a crack, and also just largely intuition. I think we both just had a feeling that it could be successful and that it was a solution to a problem that people were facing, and we'd not really put any money into marketing prior to the pandemic, and it's sort of grown organically up from sort of 0 subscribers to around 1,300. So not huge, but enough that I had a bit of confidence that we could get there.
And I think, yeah, also to kind of your point there, just entering into something and not knowing if all this sort of hours and hours of work you're putting in are ever going to pay off is also quite daunting, and kind of maintaining that motivation. And like, obviously, if the numbers are climbing, that you're like, okay, this is fine, I can keep working. But in the times where like it doesn't sort of move in a sort of in a straight line, you kind of have these sort of plateaus and dips and pickups. So it's sort of knowing in the moments where you're not, or like there's been times where we've been much more focused on development and not growth, and you're just spending money and you're not you're not focused on making money for a while, and that's always that's always a hard pill to swallow. You're kind of being like, okay, we just gotta persevere and hope, or sort of be confident in ourselves that at the other side you're gonna sort of see the reward of that. But if you're not, if you're working for yourself, it's like, okay, there's no one else to point at but us here. So
And do you think doing it together kind of helps you get through those periods because you sort of, one of you can kind of lift the other one up, or what? How does that work?
yeah, I think it would be pretty brutal to be trying it solo. Yeah, definitely having someone who, yeah, you're sort of, you get along with, and yeah, you can sort of go to in moments like that. Yeah, definitely way easier. I think
I think it's one of the tips I would have for anyone who does want to start a business. I don't think I could have done it on my own. I really think a co-founder is absolutely necessary. Yeah, ideally someone that you get along with and want to spend a lot of time with. But yeah, I'm not sure if I'd been doing it just myself, how I would have looked at, coming out of the pandemic, whether I would have just sort of shelved it and thought, okay, that idea was in the past, or yeah, it's difficult to know, but it would have been much harder to motivate myself in the times where, yeah, it was very difficult.
Yeah, great. And you've touched perfectly on where I was going to go next, which is tips for potential future entrepreneurs. So I want to start with just, what skills do you think that they would most need, and how might you think, in high school they might go about beginning to get them?
I think one thing for us is like we weren't like experts in this area. Other than personal experience, we didn't really have that much, and like we both went on to further education, and I definitely feel like the skills I learned at university were helpful, but not necessarily like structural engineering or anything, more the ability to sit down and work on something. I think there are lots of good ideas out there. I think the ability to sort of persevere and work on something and sort of see it through and sort of not be disheartened by sort of initial challenges or stumbling blocks. Because yeah, I think there was a moment at the start where like, if we have a really good idea, people will see it and it will grow. That's how but it definitely sort of, once you get into it, you realize that's not the case, and there's ways to make these things work. But the sort of perseverance to sit down and go, okay, we're going to work on this for a while. If we're 6 weeks in and nothing's happened, that's not a sign that it's not working. It's just having the sort of the confidence to say, all right, do the work first.
And I think a lot of the time, these sort of like ideas that you could pursue as a business come from combining two like areas of interest together, and that's been the case for us with sort of combining an interest in football and an interest in travel and aggregating flight and ticket information. I feel like that's a good way of sort of approaching trying to set up a business, if that is somebody's desire, is sort of take two areas that you're passionate about and trying to see if there's any potential like synergy or crossover there.
Fantastic. And I think you touched on a couple of things there I think are really important. One is, you don't really have to have experience in the area that you are thinking about starting a business in. So it isn't to say, oh, I didn't study this particular thing, therefore I can't do it. You can do anything, right? You can learn anything, but you do have to be passionate about it. It has to be something you care about, because when it gets tough, if it's not something you care about, it's going to be really hard to keep going back to. So have that passion and work really hard.
Yeah. I think that's a good point as well, because like if this all fell apart tomorrow, we'd still probably go on football trips a couple of times a year together. We went to Madrid last month and went to a couple of games. We'd probably still be doing that anyways.
Okay, I have two final questions for you. One is a follow-on from the last one, which is just, if you were back in high school sitting in those seats, what do you wish you knew then that you know now?
I probably do wish I'd known more about the options available in Scotland for entrepreneurship and setting up business. Like I never studied business management, and maybe that would have opened my eyes to a lot of this. But yeah, in school, it very much felt, for myself and for all my peers, like there was one route you could go down, and that was kind of like higher education. And I'm certainly glad that I went to university, because obviously in Scotland it's free and it's a great time. It's a great experience. You learn a lot. But it would have been good to know also about these like business funding competitions that you can pitch in, and you could do that straight out of high school. You could do that at the age of 18. You could come up with an idea and pitch for Young Edge and pursue that. And I definitely didn't have any sense of that before setting up the business and looking at options.
It's a really good point. And I think, yeah, I was thinking very sort of single direction out of high school and went off to engineering university, which I definitely don't regret. I thought it was great. I learned a lot of skills. And I got a ton of really good opportunities off the back of it. There are lots of options and opportunities out there, and a lot of them are actually not that inaccessible. So I think you just have to make sure to make yourself aware of them first of all, but then take them when they come up. Because yeah, I wasn't a particularly exceptional student by any means or anything like that, but these opportunities do arise, and I think if you're looking out for them, a lot of people are not. So there's things there to be done. So just make sure you throw your hat in the ring and do them.
Okay, my last question, I want to know which teams you guys support. What's your team?
I'm an Arsenal fan, so yeah, it's been a couple of years of coming very close, not getting over the line.
I'm a Chelsea fan. I do like to caveat this by saying we don't really come from our family isn't into football at all. So me and Joe are the only ones in our family, and we're really into football, and nobody else could care less. So we didn't really have much guidance growing up. So we got FIFA, the game, and we played a lot of that, and we both just had our favorite teams on FIFA. And so yeah, we were.
You don't have to defend why you are.
But no, so yeah, bit of a weird few years for Chelsea, but that's who I'm behind at this point.
Thank you so much for making the time for this. I really loved speaking with you and hearing about your journey. It's so fantastic how you came from this idea through everything that you've achieved. So thanks for sharing your experiences, and good luck.
Well, thank you very much for reaching out and taking the time.
Yeah, really appreciate it.